So the last videos we made, we first made a tier list video for all the infielders and catchers in MLB The Show 21. Then after that, we did a tier list for all the outfielders. Now we are on to the pitchers. Who are the best pitchers in the game? Who should be using on your team and who should you be passing on? Let's go through it. YouTube, what is going on? In case you are brand new to the channel, do not know me, my name is Scan. I upload basically daily MLB The Show videos to help you all get better at the game. So if you are brand new, if not, hit that sub button down below. We're on our way to 10K. Just in general, the videos on the channel are meant to help you all get better at the game, so feel free to take a look around, see if there are any videos that interest you. There's some general other tips to help you all get better at the game are on the channel. I would definitely recommend checking them out. If you want to come hang out with us while we're doing this live, feel free to hit the follow button on the Twitch channel down below. I will be doing a subathon tomorrow on the channel, so if you want to come hang out with us, we'll be playing MLB The Show and stuff all day. And it's going to be a great fun day to hang out with us in the community. But now, let's talk about our starting pitchers and relievers. So, like I just kind of said, we split the tier list into two positions, starters and relievers. There are a good amount of pitchers to talk about in the game, but there are a couple things you really need to focus on. The attributes, the motion of the pitcher, and the pitch selection that they have. All these are factors that go into it. For relievers, they're a little different than starters. You can get away with having less pitches for relievers, but with starters, different ball game. A lot of factors go into deciding who the best pitchers are, and depending on how you play with a pitcher, you may have someone higher up or lower depending on how you play with a particular pitcher. This is from my experience of playing the game and just things that I have learned from my use. You may pitch better or worse to someone that I pitch well with. And finally, at the end of the day, these are just my opinions. I would love to keep this conversation going in the comments. If you disagree, you think I forgot someone, make sure you drop that in the comment section. I would love to continue this conversation in the comments. But let's get into our pitcher tier list and let's get into it right away because this is going to be a long video. Next up, let's do starters, okay? So starting pitchers. So there are a bunch of things to keep in mind with starters. First of all, what is their pitching motion and things like that? The pitch mix that they have and the attributes. You'll see that some pitchers will be high overall and maybe a tier down is based on some of the attributes or pitch mix they have. Some pitchers may be lower overall that play up based on their motions and things like that. Ideally, you want to look for a good pitch mix like a sinker, cutter, mix of fastballs and breaking balls, but different speeds as well. You want this variety of things, and I want to look for the pitchers who have the best of everything. So we're gonna go through starters here, and they'll probably be the same kind of thing. There's probably a lot of B tier starters where it's like they have good attributes or something but don't have a great pitch mix. There'll be a lot of pitchers where just like completely ignore them. There's gonna be a bunch of B tier especially. All right, so let's get into the pitchers, okay? Jordan Belozovic on the Twins. Think again, middle of the road starter, 4 pitches, okay attributes. I don't think there's anything impressive on this card. I think Trevor Bauer could be a good beginner starter because he has a solid 4-seam and a slower cutter. But again, a very beginner starter, not much long-term use out of him. Jose Barrios has a good slurve, and I liked him for like 1 or 2 starts, and then, you know, could be someone you throw in your rotation if you were doing TA1, but probably not someone you want to use in the long term. Shane Bieber, I'm going to put in C tier right now. He's a mid-80. He only has a couple fastballs. They're all around the same speed. All right. Vida Blue, the new 99 no-hitter card. I haven't used him yet, but I'm going to guess he's S tier. He's got great velocity, great hits per 9. He's got a quirky release somewhat. And I think this card is going to be pretty filthy. I don't know if it's to be like best of the best. I don't think it's to be like top 2 starter in the game, but he's definitely an S tier starter at this point in the game right now. Walker Buehler, I think, is just like Shane Bieber. Nothing crazy on him. The same kind of pitcher, I feel like. Madison Bumgarner at least has like a somewhat quirky release. He's very offset with his release point. You could probably put him in his B tier. Next, we have Corbin Burns. Live series Burns we'll quickly talk about. He's one of the better B tiers. He's got sinker, cutter, fastball. I wouldn't put in A tier only because he's low overall in his per 9s. But if he goes up to high diamond, he could be in this A tier. However, the other Corbin Burns, absolutely an S tier starter. 100%. This is one of my favorite starters in the game right now. I think there's a big discrepancy between this Burns and this Burns, because this one has better attributes, and his pitch mix plays well, especially on higher difficulties. The high speed sinker, cutter. I love Corbin Burns. He's been in my rotation for weeks since he's come out, and he's staying in there for now. Edward Cabrera, another S tier. I'd probably put him either just a little worse or better than Corbin Burnes. Outlier on the sinker. He's basically Sixto Sanchez, but like on actual steroids. His release point is a little glitchy. Something with his hand. It looks like the ball is glitchy out of his hand. He's got insane pitches. And on Hall of Fame legend, one of the best starters in the game right now. He is my kryptonite. Carlos Carrasco. Put in C tier. Not a great pitch mix. An easy to obtain card to Team Affinity, but not great by any means. Luis Castillo is like very similar to Jose Barrios, except he has a little more velo than Barrios, I believe. But only 4 pitches, not a very long-term starter card. Dylan Cease. I'm gonna put him in the upper tier of B, only because of his hitting attributes. He has hitting attributes, which is interesting. He's got like 60 something power versus righties, and he's got like, somewhat electric pitch mix, with the controls gonna be a little low. He's on the upper end of this B tier, but again, not someone I'd recommend using in the long term. Garrett Cole is a fake high diamond. Like, for some reason, he just doesn't play well for a high diamond. His pitch mix just doesn't play well, but he at least has the attributes. Patrick Corbin, lefty starter. I feel like some people said he was glitchy for them, and then some people said that he was garbage for him. He's got a slow curveball. He's kind of like a Madison Bumgarner without the hitting attributes. Garrett Crochet, however, he's on the lower end of S tier. I would say he's S tier. Outlier on the 4-seam. Not the easiest release to read. I will say that as a starter, he gets a little less value because he only has 4 pitches. And if you're facing a lineup like 3-4 times, you're gonna become easier to read because you're seeing only those 4 pitches very often. Maybe a consideration if you have like a relief pitcher with a lot of energy, maybe you treat Crochet like a reliever. Like if you're someone who happens to run a cap with like crazy energy out of the pen, maybe you use like a Crochet as like a lefty reliever. Hugh Darvish, the live series, I think I'm gonna put him in top tier B. There's not a great pitch mix on this card, but again, it's a usable live series card. He doesn't have the worst by any means. I would say better than these two down here. Jacob deGrom, I mean, come at me for this. I'm putting him in the A tier. It's crazy how high his attributes are for his live series card, but a couple things with deGrom. The 4-seam and 2-seam he throws are very similar. There isn't much of a difference. They aren't good enough, I would say, for me to put him in that S tier. The attributes are there to be a successful pitcher. If he had outlier on the 4-seam though, and maybe a little more control or break on his pitches, I think he would be S tier easily. Nate Eovaldi could be a good starting pitcher for you. He's got outlier, solid pitch mix for like a beginner starter. The attributes aren't there. This card could be a little glitchy for you. Bob Feller, I think Bob Feller is just a little short of being in the A tier just because he doesn't have outlier. If he had outlier on his fastball, he would be an A tier pitcher, but he's just a little short on the stuff. Doesn't have great control either. I think he's a B tier. Jack Flaherty, lower end B tier, I would say. Lower end B tier, like not bad by any means, but definitely meh. A good all around pitch mix, but nothing great. Kevin Gausman may be, we'll put him in C. You could get away with using him because he doesn't have the worst pitch mix, but definitely nothing really impressive on that card. Bob Gibson, he's got a good well-rounded pitch mix, but again, this is just his 88 overall. I think he's not a long-term use card. I would put him here. Live series Tyler Glasnow, I'll put here as well. Only 4 pitches. Some a viable pitch mix and velocity, but like not many pitches. Tom Glavine, I think is a top tier S tier pitcher. I think he's definitely in his top 4 bunch. He's definitely a step above Crochet. His stuff is playing very well this year with his pitch mix. The breaking stuff plays well. His control is solid. He even swings the twig a little bit for me, which is nice. Josiah Gray screams just like meh pitcher. Like 4 pitches just like Belozovic. Just like, ugh. Lefty Grove, the 87. Definitely a pass. I don't think this card has enough velo. A good Lefty Grove could be in this A tier very likely. But that lower diamond Lefty Grove just is not really too great. Couple breaking balls. There's nothing really too usable on this card. Next, we have Ron Guidry. which I think is interesting. He's a 95 overall, so he has solid attributes. His release point this year seems a little different. Last year, if he had the release, like the windup like he had last year, I would say he's an easy A tier, but he's right on this border of B and A. He's a cheap budget starter and could be a viable back end of the rotation starter, but I just don't think his stuff is that great on this card. And I want to give him a little bit of a go, but he can have a little bit of deception because of his motion. Only 4 pitches though. Mike Hampton, I think, is on the upper end of A tier. He's got solid pitches, sinker, cutter, fastball. He's got hitting attributes. And if you need a back end of the rotation starter right now, I think Hampton is a good one. He's like Al Leiter Jr. 86 J Happ, I think, is down here. I mean, he's a lefty, which is somewhat valuable, and he has an okay pitch mix, but I think I used his card once, and I think he got rocked. All right, Felix Hernandez. Meh starter. Nothing too crazy. 91 Oral Hershiser, I'll put in here. I used him and he got absolutely rocked. He's closer to B tier than I would hope, but I don't know. His release doesn't play as well for me this year. He does have a viable pitch mix and solid control. All right, let's look at Rich Hill here. Rich Hill, probably a back end B tier. A back end, like, you can maybe use him if you need a lefty, but nothing great much on this card. All right, Fergie Jenkins. I've heard some people enjoy him a lot and it could put him in the back end of S tier here. But I feel like I'm going to hold my caution and put him in the front end of the A tier. I mean, I haven't tested this card or faced him, so I don't have much of a say on this card. But he's right on this border here, I would say. He's got a solid pitch mix and good attributes, but I don't know how this stuff actually plays. Walter Johnson here. This seems like a worse Bob Feller. Just like, not too great, but at least he'll have some velo. Live Series Kershaw, we'll put him in B. You know, you could use him for a lefty starter. Slow breaking ball. I mean, not the worst starter in the game right now by any means. 92 Dallas Keuchel. I think this card could be a good budget starter. A good budget back end of rotation starter. He's got the sinker cutter fastball mix that is beloved in this game. He's a lefty. He's got solid control. He's probably like a lefty version of Orel Hershiser, I feel like. We're getting right to some Yankees here, by the way. Michael King, the 85. I could put him like in a Corbin Burns category. He's got the pitch mix you want, sinker cutter, cheap budget starter, but the attributes aren't there. And I don't think his release is gonna be very quirky at all. I think I'll put the 87 Kluber here as well. Just the attributes are a little weak in his card, and Kluber doesn't have much velo, and this one doesn't have that much control either. However, the 92 one, which is a bump up, I would say is A tier. Could be a solid back end of the rotation, started with the sinker cutter fastball mix. He could dot you up and could be definitely frustrating to face, but his stuff isn't as good as his 99 last year. Michael Kopech, the 87 future star. Middle of the road, B tier. He's got outlier, not much control. He could be annoying to face, but yeah. All right, so we got 85 Cliff Lee next. We'll put him in C. You know, he's got a couple solid pitches, but this card is just very weak attribute-wise. However, 97 Cliff Lee is S tier. I think he's just as good, if not better, than Tom Glavine. Sinker, cutter, great pitch mix, really good control. I think he's got the best control in the game right now. If you're playing against someone who is very hesitant at swinging on the edge of the zone, or maybe even chases out of the zone a lot, Cliff Lee can be a pest just because that really good control, man. Another top tier control guy, Al Leiter, definitely S tier, but I know he's got the great pitch mix, good control. That cutter has a lot of movement. It's really difficult to hit. I think this card is actually really nasty. All right, John Lester, he's got a sinker and a cutter. You know, he's got a couple usable pitches. Could be a usable, like, beginner pitcher for your team. Matthew Liberatore, though, I feel like he doesn't have a great mix. Put him in C tier. All right, Jesus Luzardo. I use him a fair bit. You know, he could be a maybe usable lefty starter, but very meh, to say the least. Lance Lynn, I'll put in this class of, like, Glasnow. Gossman, you know, I don't think you want to use him as like a low diamond starter over one of these guys, but you know, he's not terrible. Greg Maddux is interesting. I used him and he got rocked. The thing is, he has control, he has solid attributes, but his stuff doesn't have much to it. They're very slow pitches. He has a sinker and a cutter, but they're slow. He's kind of like Kluber, but with better control. So I think he's an A tier guy. Some people like him, some people despise him. Alex Manoah, the guy that owned the Yankees, probably put him down here. A very meh Topps Now card. He may be our first D tier card. Just breaking ball heavy. He could play a little better, potentially. I haven't tested him. He could play like a Fernando Valenzuela type pitcher, but I really think he's going to be in D tier. Personally, I think he's probably a complete pass of a card. All right, German Marquez. He's like Luzardo back end 42 series starter. Pedro Martinez, I think, was one of the better 42 series starting pitchers we got. With a couple parallels, he was pretty solid. So I feel like this Pedro could be like a lower end A tier starter for the back end of your rotation. Again, nothing super crazy on this Pedro yet. The 99 Pedro is going to be scary when we get that. Shane McClanahan has a little bit of velo, lefty starter, but again, not a great pitch mix, just like Josiah Gray. And these guys, just like a very not so exciting future star starter. John Means, I think he gets a little bit of value being a lefty, so put him in B tier, just like Wade Miley. But both these guys, no, not great Topps Now cards that would really suggest in the long term. Jack Morris, I'll probably put him in D tier as well. Not a great pitch mix on Jack Morris. I mean, I feel like there's not much use. I haven't seen him used even once, honestly. Joe Musgrove, I think, is a little bit of a glitchy for Topps Now card. His curveball is really solid. But again, just a Topps Now starter. Not very much long-term use out of him. 87 Roy Oswalt, I'm going to put in the lower end of B. Just nothing too great on this Oswalt, attribute-wise. This Oswalt is interesting. He's either on the upper end of B tier or lower A tier. Like, I'm going to put him on the lower end of A. Back end of the rotation starter. I think the hits per 9 are a little low on this card, so it could be an issue you run into. But the slow curveball could be a pest for people. But again, there's nothing super crazy. Some people do like Oswalt, so I'll put him in the A tier. Freddie Peralta, one of the better Topps Now pitchers, attribute-wise. Only 4 pitches, though, which kind of limits him. But not a bad starter by all means. Rick Porcello, middle of tier, B tier. He's got a couple solid fastballs, okay per 9s, but there's not much control or deception. I'm surprised this card is the overall it is. David Price, I find that he has like no hits per 9 whatsoever. I think he's C tier. I remember using him at the start, and the PCIs against him were absolutely massive. Yeah, I think he's probably worse than some of these starters in here. Pryor, another disappointing TA2 starter. If he had one more pitch, he could be like Roy Oswalt, but he only has 4 pitches. Per 9s aren't crazy. Definitely a meh starter. Only put him in your rotation if you need it. Garrett Richards doesn't it has like an okay velo, but like only an 85, doesn't have outlier or anything, so that kind of limits him. So we'll say he's a C. Mr. Robin Roberts, another D tier starter. He has some breaking stuff, but again, just like not much attributes or anything. Probably a pass. He's like Juan Marichal Jr. Carlos Rodon could be a somewhat usable lefty Topps Now card, but again, kind of limited because it's only a Topps Now card, only low 80 overall, and those attributes are kind of a big deal with the pitchers. Grayson Rodriguez, I've heard some people tried him, didn't think he was bad, so put him in like B tier. That's for sure. Definitely like B tier. Jackson Rutledge is basically the exact same pitcher as like Josiah Gray. Like, just like not a great pitch mix on that card. It's like, yeah. I mean, Nolan Ryan put in B tier. He's just like Bob Feller. Solid stuff. Not great control. If he had outlier though, he would be scary, but he doesn't. Chris Sale is a quirky release for a live series starter. He could definitely be someone you use as like a beginning starter as a lefty. Sixto Sanchez, I'm going to put in the back end of A. He could be a back end of your rotation starter. I think he's the best 42 series starter altogether because he's the outlier. He's like Edward Cabrera, just worse attributes. And again, he could probably pitch either really well or really bad. Max Scherzer, middle of the road, B tier starter. He's a 90 overall at least now, but yeah. Mike Scott, the new pennant erase reward. I saw the pitch mix, very meh pitch mix, but you can get away with using him as a back-end starter. Put him in the middle of the B tier. Same with Tom Seaver. Tom Seaver is probably in the same position. He has a better pitch mix, but the stuff isn't really 100% there on his low 90 card. This is Tariq Skubal, just like another Topps Now lefty. Nothing too crazy on him. Warren Spahn. They made Spahn's release shorter this year, and it could be a okay back-end rotation starter for the very beginning, if you're just hopping on the game for the first time. But again, not a very long-term starter, not top tier by any means. Don Sutton has a weird pitch mix, but I found you can kind of get away with him in comparison to these few. He could be down here or here, but he's probably here. I feel like you can get away with him a little more. Frank Tanana, I think, is an A-class starter, mostly because the attributes. He is a 95 overall lefty, and I found his breaking stuff on Legend is actually kind of glitchy. But good hitters will crush this card just because it's 2 fastballs and 2 breaking balls. So he's kind of easy to hit just because of the pitch mix, but is a somewhat usable starter because of the attributes. Spencer Turnbull is, again, just another Topps Now starter that is like meh. Fernando Valenzuela. I'm putting Fernando in the back of S tier. All the breaking stuff is so difficult to hit with Fernando that he's super glitchy. And I find that some good hitters can hit him, but also some good hitters do struggle against him. And the higher difficulty, the better this card gets. But also, if you are on lower difficulty, if you have control and you're creative as a pitcher, he's definitely this level of pitcher. Interesting that 93 overall can be this great. But Fernando is actually a pretty good starter. Live Series Verlander, I think, is more usable than these few starters down here. Definitely has a better pitch mix. I think this Verlander is probably upper tier B class. Actually, we'll put him lower A. He'd be a 5 starter. Not biggest fan of his pitch mix. I wish he had a little more velo on the fastball. I feel like Verlander deserves a little more velo. I've seen some people have success with this card, though. And he does have good attributes, so it could be like a back-end or rotation starter. But I probably wouldn't recommend him that much. He's like right about here and here. Brandon Webb, I think, is right in the same class. He's got the sinker cutter. I feel like the cutter is 0 movement on this card, but he does have a solid mix of pitches. Could be a back, like just like Oswalt, back end of the rotation starter if you happen to have him. All right, 94 Zach Wheeler, I think, could be pretty underrated. I think a back end A tier starter, though. He's got a solid like 4 pitches, pretty good velo. I want to give this card a go, to be honest with you. It's like a 5th starter option, but he's not up here with like these pitchers, or even definitely not S tier. Brandon Woodruff, I'll probably put like right with these starters. Another okay basic live series starter. Cy Young, I think, is a pass. All breaking stuff again. I don't think the breaking stuff is going to be good enough in this card to warrant a Valenzuela type pitcher. So definitely a pass in the D tier. And finally, Quinn Priester, a good underrated Team Affinity 2 card. I've heard good things about him. He's got good velocity, not outlier, but pretty good velocity on the fastball. He could throw high 90s, but just not the best pitch mix. He's not up with Edward Cabrera or anything, but a good back end of the rotation starter if you happen to have him. And this is my tier list for the starting pitchers. To go over it, S tier is who you should be striving for in the long run. These are the best in the game right now. A is guys you could throw in the back end of your rotation, or it could be your ace to start off when you're just building the team. B tier is like you can maybe get away with using them against not so great players, but you want to upgrade them as soon as possible. And your current God squad probably won't belong in your rotation very long. C is like they're not completely unusable. Like if you really need a pitcher, you could use them. And D is just like you probably want to avoid them at all costs, just based on the pitches and all that. And I want to be clear, these are my opinions at the end of the day, and obviously I can't test every single card in the game just from looking at attributes. I think this is how most of them place. All right, so let's get into relievers. So key thing with relievers, you get away with less pitches. You don't need 4 or 5 pitches on a reliever for them to be effective. You probably want to look for velocity, or at least a good pitch mix if they don't have high velocity. A lot of relievers have like nasty stuff, but not as great control maybe, or just not as great per nines. So there's a lot of things to account for relievers. Also, there aren't many lefties, so some guys will get a boost just because they are lefties. Nick Anderson is a maybe usable reliever if you're just building up the pen. Back end of the bullpen type guy, though. Not the best pitch mix on this card, but he does have a pretty good slider, I believe. I feel like 88 Matt Barnes is basically like Nick Anderson as well, just like a little different per nines. Very similar type cards between these two. All right, Heath Bell. Heath Bell has 4 pitches. I haven't faced him or used him, but I feel like it's again like maybe middle of the road reliever. Maybe nothing too crazy on this card, that's for sure. But you know, could be a solid reliever if you're just building up the pen. Zach Britton, to the daily moments, I think is an S tier reliever. Lefty, outlier on the sinker, which is gonna be very difficult to hit. Keep in mind though that with Britton, this Britton last year was pretty good for a bit and quickly got outclassed by other lefties with better stuff. This Britton's pretty nice though. He's got a pretty good pitch mix and Britton usually plays well. So I think he's definitely a top tier reliever right now. Same with Aroldis Chapman. I think Aroldis Chapman is an S tier. If you have him, you should put him in your pen. Great velocity, not great control. He's got the splitter on his live series, so he has a good breaking type pitch to throw. A good reliever for sure at the start of the year usually. Steve Cishek. I want to put him in A, but we'll put him in B. He's got a quirky release. Good hitters will hit him well still. But he does have a quirky release if you're looking for a beginner reliever when building your bullpen. Cishek is a guy with a jerky release where it's difficult to read his pitches. And if you're very low in rank, some bad players will have a really difficult time hitting him, I would say. All right, Wade Davis. I think this card can be an A tier. A somewhat affordable reliever. You can put him in the back end of your bullpen for the longer term. He's got the good sinker. The only thing is I think his control is a little weak on this card. That's why he isn't like a super like front end. Like you don't want to use him as a closer or anything. Gold Rob Dibble I'm putting in this class as well. Even though he's only a gold, he plays like a diamond. He's got the fastball, slider, cutter, all different speeds, so it's tough to time, especially on Hall of Fame and Legend. This gold one, you know, it gets the job done for an 84. I was a big fan of the gold one for a while. And definitely, I would use him in your pen over these 4, that's for sure. 95 Rob Dibble, maybe one of the best relievers in the game right now. He's definitely a top 2 or 3 reliever in the game right now. Again, outlier on the 4-seam, cutter at 92, so it's really tough to slow down and time that when the fastball is over 100. And then a slider, and you can really tunnel those well, especially with pinpoint and Hall of Fame and Legend. 95 Dibble is honestly dangerous, dude. 84 Jake Diekman, I think is one of the better lefties in the game. I'm not going to put him in S though, because there are other very good lefties and this card just does lack in control. But he has a really deceptive release, good sinker, slider, 4-seam mix. 88 Sean Doolittle, he's valuable for being a lefty, but doesn't have much velocity or anything like that. If you have him, he's more so of a back end of the bullpen reliever. You don't want to use him for any sort of crucial situation whatsoever. Dennis Eckersley, this 87 one, just not bad, but nothing really great in this card. The per 9s are a little low. And for an 87, the Eckersley's pitch mix isn't crazy. 97 Eckersley, though, I think is an S tier reliever. Great control, a lot better per 9s. And I like Eckersley cards usually. And this one with pinpoint should be really dangerous for throwing dots and having a nice, nasty slider. He throws across his body. The slider in this one should be really good. I think Jerry's Familia is an S tier reliever as well. Honestly, I may put him above Eckersley. He's got a bowling ball sinker. It's a really fast sinker. It's really tough to time him up. I think the control could be a somewhat issue, but he has nasty stuff. I actually really like this card when I use them. 91 John Franco, I would say is an A tier reliever. I think if you really are good with pinpoint and you hit spots well, he's definitely a good lefty, like someone that could be in your bullpen as long as Diekman. Only thing is he doesn't have velocity. Is a breaking ball focus pitcher, so he can have some deception, but you also, if you miss spots, will be a very easy pitcher to read. I don't think actually we'll put him up here. Gagne's definitely better than some of these guys. He's got solid per 9s at the slow curveball. For some reason, I just always suck with Gagne. I just never know what to throw with him. With Pinpoint this year, I think a 98 Gagne like we usually get could be really insane. But this one I think is more so of a meh card. I want to put him on like the upper end of A, but right now he's probably back end of the S tier. Just because of the slurve and a solid pitch mix. He's one of the better relievers for me right now. A 99 Goose would be insane, but this one doesn't have outliers, so he's a little short on the velo. Shane Green, the gold, I think, honestly, I'm putting him in A. A lot of people use the Shane Green over a lot of these diamonds because of the cutter. He has pretty solid velocity. This card is a pretty good reliever. He's got the fastball, cutter, slider. Josh Hader, I think, is a B tier. He has only 3 pitches. For some reason, he doesn't want to give his live series a changeup. It's just fastball, fastball, slider. Any sort of solid hitter will just sit fastball and probably hit him very hard. If he had like one more pitch or any more deception, he probably would be an A tier, but I would rather use Diekman or Franco over Hader, that's for sure. Liam Hendricks, I think, is in the B tier as well. Just kind of a middle-of-the-road reliever. I actually pitched pretty effectively the 1 or 2 times I used him because he does have 5 pitches. But again, just nothing too crazy on this card right now. Tom Henke is 3 pitches. Again, just like you could kind of get away with him in your bullpen. Middle-of-the-road reliever. Probably put him right around here. He's got the 3 pitches, solid velo on the 4 seam. Trevor Hoffman, I know some people would probably put him in like the lower A tier. I'm going to put him in like the upper B tier. There's not much velo on him. He's got solid breaking stuff, but most good hitters will find a way to hit Hoffman pretty well. Kenley Jansen, a somewhat usable starter reliever. Quick budget buy. He's got a cutter. Again, just not many pitches on this card. And it is only an 87 overall. Craig Kimbrell, again, just like a middle-of-the-road reliever. This one could be a little glitchy. That's how breaking balls play this year, and he'll have a little bit of velo on him. But I don't know. Not very much on this card. Jose Leclerc, I've heard good things on this card. He was a glitchy card back in the day. He's got like 4 pitches that are all pretty solid. Definitely, I would rather use him over some of these guys just because of his pitch mix. Leclerc is a usually like glitchy reliever in BR as well. 88 Mariano Rivera, I would probably lump in here or here. He does have the cutter and the sinker, so he's a little more usable than his 88 overall last year, or his low 80 overall one last year. You know, he's not bad. He's got a solid pitch mix and 5 pitches, but doesn't have much velo and not enough control in this version. However, 99 Mariano is, in my opinion, the best or second best reliever in the game. He's got the 5 pitches. He's got the slider and changeup. If you're using this card, focus on doing the sinker, cutter, fastball, but don't forget about the sinker. I mean, the changeup and slider. Throw those pitches out of zone, dot them up, mix them in with the other pitches, and I think that Mariano is really good this year. Joe Nathan has 5 pitches, but I'd probably put him in here. Just like, I don't think there's much excitement on this card. I don't know. I just don't think he's doesn't have much stuff on this card. Hopefully we get a better version of Joe Nathan soon. Darren O'Day, I'll put in A. Solid back-end reliever. The submarine release can mess with people, but good hitters will crush him because they could read his pitches. He tips his pitches, so good hitters who know how to read that will hit him very hard. Troy Percival, honestly, I think he may be one of the first C tier. He has 3 pitches, not much velocity, and it seems like a guy that you just have to sit dead red fastball and hit very hard. I think he probably is worse than Kimbrell in a lot of these guys. I just don't see any position where he uses Troy Percival. Goldan Plesac, I'm going to put here. If you need a lefty reliever, it could be a solid starter lefty reliever. I pitched pretty well with him. You know, he does have fastball, slider. His release this year feels a little different. His 2-seam isn't too bad. He's got to treat the 2-seam almost like a cutter in the sense that it's a slower fastball. The Diamond Plesac, however, we're going to put here. He's definitely a viable lefty in the pen. Nothing really insane like Chapman or Britton, I would say, but a viable lefty if you just need someone to throw in there for now. Nothing really insane by any means. David Robertson, he's got a nasty cutter, solid pitch mix, but again, just like the per 9s aren't going to be crazy in this card. He doesn't have much velocity. So if you're playing against a good hitter again, they'll probably hit this card very hard. And looking at who else is in A, I'll probably put him in B. Sergio Roma will put on the upper tier of B. He's got usually a generally like quirky motion. The slider plays pretty well usually, but this one doesn't have enough per 9s or anything. I haven't seen the most success out of this card. Gold Lee Smith will put in the upper tier or B tier. He has the velo. He's like a not as good Rob Dibble. I think this could be a solid BR card for people, but again, just not in your God squad, I would say. However, this Lee Smith I think is lower S tier personally. If you're good with pinpoint and you hit spots, mix in the fastball, cutter, and forkball and make those your 3 pitches, kind of tunnel them off each other. Lee Smith is a top tier reliever. John Smoltz, probably the lower end of B. Not a great pitch mix on this card. He's not going to have much velocity either. I mean, not the worst by any means, but I wouldn't seek to buy him for his price point on the market. Blake Snell, I'm going to put in lower A tier. A probably better lefty diamond than Sean Doolittle. He's got high stamina, so you could use him as a long reliever type. And usually, I mean, Snell normally has a glitchy release. I'm not sure how this one plays, but this one's a pretty solid lefty reliever. Again, he gets that value of being a lefty reliever. So I think he gets that extra little bump up. Houston Tree, I think, is a middle of the road reliever. He's got good hits per 9. Not a fan of his pitch mix, and I really struggled choosing pitches to throw effectively with him. Bruce Sutter is like a Troy Percival, I feel like. He just has, it's like fastball, splitter, slider, I think. Very easy pitch mix to read, and I think it's difficult to throw the splitter as a strike. Ryan Tepera, I'll put in B. A little bit glitchy. I would say that he's got like solid break on his pitches, but not a super long-term guy in the A tier, I would say. Billy Wagner, I would say is an A tier, but I think he's like a Doolittle type. This Billy Wagner doesn't have much velocity. If you guys know Billy Wagner release points, he normally has a pretty good release. It's tough to read. This one, though, there's a very laid-back release. I don't know how to describe it, but he pitches like a finesse pitcher with his motion. Adam Wainwright. Someone can come at me for this, but I think Wainwright is a low-end S-tier reliever. I mean, he's not going to be your back-end closer, I would say, but he is someone that has a somewhat quirky release this year. He's got the sinker cutter. He has 5 pitches, and his release plays really well. I know a lot of top-tier players use Wainwright for a fair bit, and I think they still use him. I have him in my bullpen right now. I want to use him some more. This card is a very underrated card in the game right now. If you want a reliever, you should look to buy that Wainwright, that's for sure. Gold Devin Williams, I thought was worth discussing. I think he could be in this list right here. It's like a better righty reliever just because of his pitch mix. He's got the changeup, the cutter, and Kerry Wood, I would say, is a back end guy down here. Good velocity, okay pitch mix, but yeah, not in this A tier of guys. And finally, Kirby Yates. I'm sorry, Kirby. I think you're the one that's D tier. Not any life on the fastball whatsoever. Bunch of breaking balls that are easy to read and take outside of the zone. I think Kirby may be the worst diamond. The only reason that there aren't many relievers in the D tier. All right, so this is the pitcher tier list. The reliever tier list. I think I'm pretty happy with that. That'll be on YouTube. By the way, we just tier